Quake 2 does not hold quite the same level of importance to the industry as a whole as the other id Software titles that came before it. Wolfenstein invented all the trappings of the modern first-person shooter. Doom expanded on it in every single way and was the first immensely popular one. Quake brought everything into full 3D with everything being built out of polygons. Quake 2 was the first id Software game to support OpenGL straight out of the box. It was also either the first game or one of the very first games to have colored lighting. It had the Marine you play as fiddling with the gun as you played the game, especially if you were idle. It was kind of the beginning of enemy AI in that enemies would do more than just charge at you and shoot. They would duck. While all of these innovations are certainly important to the history of the genre, none of them are quite as groundbreaking as what something like the original Quake brought to the table, where it made multiplayer the thing that it is today, all by itself. Instead, what Quake 2 opted to do was present a finely tuned first-person shooter experience, and it does this quite well. Although there are aspects of it that have not aged particularly well, the level design surely has. Quake 2 is not one for story. You get a cutscene at the beginning of the game, you get a cutscene at the end of the game, and that's all the story you're given apart from mission objectives that you have to complete, which you are given in little tiny scenes in between the different levels. In Quake 2 you play as a space marine sent to the planet Strogg. You are on a ship and you get launched from the escape pod down to the planet's surface. While most of the other marines were wiped out, you managed to get clipped on the way down to the planet's surface by a fellow marine in his escape pod. It causes you to lose control of your own pod and crash land way off course. This keeps you out of the blast zone of the big gun, and you wind up surviving down to the planet's surface, where you live to fight another day. And the enemies in this game are called the Strogg, and they are a race of biomechanical beings who take over other races and incorporate them into their own. So you will fight a wide variety of enemy types in this game as a direct result of that, and they're all biomechanical creatures with the exception of one that feels out of place. This game really does an excellent job of presenting you with a wide variety of enemies to fight as you fight through the planet Strogg, and it keeps things fresh by throwing new enemies at you right up towards the end of the game. Every enemy feels distinct, and you have to use different methods of taking them all out. When they attack you in groups, and they frequently will, you have to think on your feet and be quick with your movements. Quake 2 is not an easy game to beat, and you have to be fast and you have to think quickly in order to get through it. You have to know your weapons, and you have to use them wisely. Speaking of the weapons, they are another very strong point of this game. The weapons in this game are fucking awesome. You get one of the best double-barrel shotguns you've ever heard, and it has a boom that sounds like the hammer of the gods. This thing sounds like you're really tearing into something when you fire it. It's awesome. Then you have the Hyper Blaster, which is an energy weapon that fires lasers very, very, very quickly. You have a mid-level machine gun and a heavy chain gun. You have a basic laser weapon that you're really only going to use at the beginning of the game before you get the initial shotgun. And you probably aren't going to use the shotgun much once you get the double barrel because it's so much better. In fact, the double barrel is so awesome that there is an entire secret level of this game just dedicated to finding it. The Railgun is one of the cooler weapons in this game. It requires decent aiming to be able to use accurately, and it has a slow rate of fire. But it's so powerful that you probably won't care when you're using it, and it looks badass when you fire it. It has this spiraling light that goes out from it with a blue light in the middle of that. It's awesome. It is a lot of fun to use. The BFG returns in this game in a new form called the BFG 10K. And just to up the ante, this thing has recoil on it every single time you fire it. It makes your vision go straight up for a second or two before you go back down and recenter. You have a charging handle on it that you have to pull when you fire it, and it has exhaust ports. This thing is glorious. You will love it. And it looks even more impressive than the BFG did in the original Doom. The enemy AI in this game has aged poorly. Many of them will just charge at you or just stand and fire at you. They duck, but it looks silly nowadays because they don't move when they duck. They just stand and then duck down, try to duck under your fire, and all you have to do is adjust your aim and keep firing at them. It looks silly by today's standards, but it was a big deal back then. The enemies in this game are not smart, but they are numerous, and that will keep you on your toes. They do present a really cool art design as everything looks biomechanical, and everything looks like a combination of living tissue and all kinds of robotics. You got like robot legs and human bodies and guns attached to the arms of the human bodies and all kinds of crazy stuff in this game. It's very cool and very unique and gives the Strogg their own look that makes them look and feel unified and badass without them all looking the same. You recognize a Strogg when you see it. Graphically, what can I say? This game has not aged well at all. What you're looking at is not a true representation of what the original game looked like, because I played it with a source port that adds quite a few new features that really spice up the original game. The original game did not use the full res textures that this one does. It came with higher res textures and it did not use them to save space. It used a lower res version of them. This version fixes that problem, so you get prettier textures than the original. It also improved the game in a number of other ways, such as lighting and water effects. They look much, much better in this game than they did in the original Quake 2. But this cannot fix the very old-looking models. These are low poly by today's standards. When it came out, it was the best-looking game on the market. Nowadays, everything looks angular and very low poly count. Don't let this deter you from playing the game, though, because the gameplay itself and the level design are still both fantastic. This game features a different structure than the games that came before it, in that you have mission objectives now that you have to complete as you run throughout the Strogg planet. You will run from one place to another and back and forth and do some backtracking that makes sense within the context of the mission that you're working on. It never feels incredibly tedious to backtrack. It's always very quick, but it does mean that you will occasionally stroll through parts of the level that are just dead because you've already killed everything there is to kill in it. While this game does not do away with key cards of previous games entirely, it adds another layer of depth to the game by including objectives, as I mentioned before. This is a nice feature, and it really helps the game overall feel less repetitive, because the environments can at times feel a little bit repetitive. They are all very similar to one another in that they are all these gray steel walls and doors and everything like that, minus a few minor exceptions such as the palace at the end of the game. The sound deserves special mention as well. Quake 2's soundtrack is legendary. This soundtrack is badass, it is heavy, it is hard rocking, and it really gets you pumped up to go shoot things in the face. I love it. Definitely check this soundtrack out. Find some tracks on YouTube and give them a listen, because they are well worth your time. They are badass. The sound design in this game is also pretty darn good, as a number of the weapons sound very, very powerful. You will love listening to the chain gun rev up. You will love the deep boom of the double barrel shotgun as well. It sounds awesome and is more than commendable. id Software did great with the sound design on this one, and it really helps the game stay good to this day, despite the AI and the graphics not aging particularly well. Good luck finding a game for it today, but the multiplayer on this game is pretty good as well. It presented with, I believe, 16-player matches and a number of game modes. It was fairly standard for the time, which means it's well behind the times today because multiplayer has advanced a lot since then. But the weapons were a lot of fun to use, and that made the multiplayer a lot of fun to play. You have a variety of options to play Quake 2. There is a port to the PlayStation, which kind of does not look very good at all. I have not played it, so I can't speak to its quality. There's a port to the Nintendo 64, which looks a little bit better, and again, I haven't played it, so I cannot speak to its quality. There's a port to the Xbox 360, which visually looks even better than the PC version because they used the full-res textures in it, and they did things like 16x anti-scopic filtering and stuff like that to it to really make it look much better. Not much better, but better than the original. However, if you're going for the best version of this game, the best option available to you is and will always be the PC original. Although I would recommend using a source port with this game. I used KM Quake 2 for this Let's Play, and I think it's a very good one. If you like what you see here, this is what it presents you with. Although there are a variety of mods to add to the different source ports, such as high-res texture packs that make the environments look a lot better. Thanks to the various improvements that it made to the first-person shooter formula, as well as the enemy variety, the weapons being a lot fun to fire, and the excellent level design, Quake 2 remains an excellent game to this day, and it does have my absolute highest recommendation. I definitely would suggest you pick this one up and play it. It's a classic for a damn good reason.